Okay, Unit 7, Lecture 3C. I want to continue with the Espionage and Sedition Act we just talked about. This espionage is spying, spying against our government. Sedition is speaking out against the government, which should technically be protected by our First Amendment. Though in times of war, and we want to remember this, our rights have limits, and during times of war, the government shrinks those limits. And this is one of those cases. This guy Schenck has passed out flyers, anti-war flyers. He's going to be arrested for it, and the Supreme Court will decide in Schenck versus United States, which was on your whiteboard, remember, it's your next Supreme Court case, that our freedom of speech has limits, and it does not or is not protected when it represents a clear and present danger to those around us. So the example the court uses in Schenck is like you're not allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. It's going to cause a panic. People are going to be injured. That's criminal. All right, so it's not protected. All right, they say every bit of speech, every act of speech must be judged to the circumstances in which it was spoken, okay? So I want you to remember our freedoms have limits, and in wartime especially, all right? The Great Migration was on that list. We've talked about this a couple of times. It's a movement of African Americans to northern cities. It begins in the early 20th century, early 1900s, late 19th century. It's really going to pick up pace during World War I because, as I've just said, 4.8 million white males are drafted into the military. There's a lot of jobs open in the northern cities, so African Americans are going to flood north to the cities for jobs. All right. The Armistice, the ceasefire, ending of hostilities, is going to be signed on November 11th, 11/11 at 11 a.m. All right, that'll be Armistice Day in Germany, in German time, I mean, and this will become Veterans Day. Okay, at the end of the war, Woodrow Wilson comes up with 14 points. His 14 points are very important. You need to know it. It's Wilson's statement and plans for peace after World War I, including the plans to eliminate the causes of war. So the key ideas of the 14 points include the principles of national self-determination, freedom of seas, and the League of Nations. National self-determination meant each national group should be in charge of its own destiny. For example, the Polish people should be living under a Polish government if that was what they wanted. Freedom of the seas meant all nations' ships should be able to sail in international waters without threat of attack by another country's ships or U-boats. Okay, and the League of Nations would be an organization of nations established at the end of World War I to maintain the peace and stability. We can talk about our problems before we resort to war. All right, the treaty that ends World War I is the Treaty of Versailles, and it recognized these principles. However, it also included the mandate system, which violated the idea of national self-determination. Under the terms of the treaty, a mandate was a region administered by another country until it was judged ready for independence. The Versailles Treaty divided the Ottoman Empire, what's now Turkey, into mandates, lands to be supervised or governed by the Allies under the direct oversight of the League of Nations, okay? So France will take Syria, Britain's going to receive Palestine and Iraq, all right? The Treaty of Versailles also requires Germany, and this is important, and this is why it causes World War II, to assume all blame and responsibility for the war, okay? So Germany has to then pay for the war. Reparations. Reparations is a word you need to remember. Reparations is payments for war damages. All right, so Germany takes responsibility for the war. They have to pay $30-some-odd billion in reparations, and they just can't afford it. It's going to cause a lot of problems worldwide after this, and we'll talk about it. All right. Finally, the Treaty of Versailles is going to redraw the national boundaries in Europe. It's going to create new nations like Finland, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Poland, and we'll look at where we have done a map about this in class, okay? So in short, the Treaty of Versailles recognized the principle of national self-determination in Europe, but not the Middle East, Africa, or Asia. And part of that problem in the Middle East is because what's under the Middle East? Oil, okay? And the European powers are now holding on to some of that oil, and they're not anxious to give up their colonial empires, all right, or their imperial nature. All right, Wilson negotiates the Treaty of Versailles. He sends it to the United States Senate for ratification or approval, and under the Constitution, that's what he has to do. The Senate approves treaties, and the Senate, who the Republicans who control the Senate, are not going to ratify it. All right, they're going to raise objections, especially the League of Nations, saying they don't want a foreign organization or organization of foreigners controlling our foreign policy. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up there. We do not ratify the Treaty of Versailles or the League of Nations.